Okay, you just saw the heathen have spoken, so hopefully you enjoyed it. I feel like we really covered feminism, but we're going to talk about it again. Have women achieved gender equality in the U.S.? This is going to be, I can't even tell you what an amazing conversation. And the people that we have on stage are two of my favorite people in the world. Okay, so what are we doing? Up first is Karen Garst, who holds a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Go Badgers. Thank you. She retired as executive director. No, not yet. Good, you should cheer. She's amazing. She retired as executive director of the Oregon State Bar in 2008 and has edited 2 anthologies about women and secularism titled Women Beyond Belief and Women v. Religion. And apart from all of her academic pursuits, Karen is a huge fan of trees, if you know what I mean. Welcome, Karen! All right, now for the sake of confusion, let's welcome another Karen to the stage. Karen Stron is a Canadian spokesperson for men's rights. She's a producer and writer, I didn't want that to happen again, known for My Thoughts Regarding Chris Cantwell, Revenge of the Misogynerds, and The Red Pill. She also dabbles on the YouTubes, making videos critical of feminism. And it is important to note that Kevin is both her dog's name and her porn name. Welcome, Karen. It's time. Lastly, our moderator is the lovely and talented Melissa Chen, returning to the Pabst for the 2nd year in a row. Melissa studied computational biology at both MIT and Boston U and describes herself as a genome scientist by day and secular activist by night, though not always in that order. She is the editor-curator at the Global Secular Humanist Movement. Oh, man, that was a lot. And co-founder and CEO at Securing Change, and managing director of the Ideas Without Borders not-for-profit. She has no free time, essentially. Melissa is also known for sneaking the word bukkake into every live event where she's speaking, and she already did so now, at least once. Welcome, Melissa!
Like where you're sitting. Thanks, Dimitri. All right, so today we'll be talking about a very dirty F word. Yes, it's feminism. It's a word that, when uttered, causes some men to be uncomfortable, some women to completely deny association. But to others, it is worn very proudly as a label, sometimes accompanied by a pink pussy hat. So I just want to get a sense of the room here today. How many of you identify as a feminist? Just sort of clap, make some noise, whatever, just. All right. That's pretty good. I guess now you'll know who's not going to be making your sandwiches. Mostly these people. Okay, so our debate topic today is, have women achieved gender equality in the United States? 2 things to note. We're limiting the discussion to just the United States. So nobody can pull any trump cards like Saudi Arabia or like maybe, in Japan they do this bukkake stuff, so none of that. So number two, we're sticking to a very binary approach to gender just for the sake of discussion, so maybe trigger warning for some. So the definition of gender equality that both the panelists have agreed to is this. I'm going to read it, and that's the definition we're going to operate on. Gender equality. It is the state of being equal, especially in status, rights, responsibility, as well as accountability, responsibility, and obligations. Very clunky. So without further ado, let's begin. Given that we're dealing with 2 Karens here, this debate's going to be very difficult to follow. I'm going to MacGyver this with a simple fix. So, Ms. Stron. But it's evil Karen.
It's gonna ruin my hair. Do you know how long I spent making it look like this?
Oh, yeah. You look good. Okay.
Okay?
So, Dr. Karen, no, Karen,
Dr.
evil
Karen.
Karen. Evil Karen is going to go first, and she's going to state her case. And then we're going to just continue the conversation organically.
Okay, I would argue that women in the U.S. are equal in terms of rights, privileges, and status. Sometimes more than equal. In fact, women have a couple of rights that men do not have in the United States. They have the right to a whole bunch of things that women have, women are entitled to, but in order to get those, they have to sign up for selective service sometime between the ages of 18 and 26, or they lose the rights to those things altogether, right? So Pell Grants, certain types of federal employment, they will not be eligible for that if they fail to apply, register with selective service by the time they're 26. So essentially, women have all of those rights. Women also have the right in the U.S. to bodily integrity as minors. So nobody has a legal right to, not even their parents have a legal right to decide, I'm going to cut a healthy body part off of my baby girl. But that decision on the part of parents towards their sons in the United States and pretty much and everywhere else in the world, and I know we weren't going to bring in everywhere else in the world, but is perfectly legal. And in the U.S., it's actually, it's really, really common. So those are two things that I can point to that women actually have superior protections under the law as men. Now, my argument is that men and women are not equal, but it's not because women lack status or rights or protections under the law that are at least as good as those given to men. It is actually because they are held less accountable, they have fewer obligations to others, to society and to government, and because they are held less responsible for their actions, particularly when they are bad actors. So essentially, my argument is that if we want genuine gender equality, there are a series of moves that we have to make policy-wise that either grant men equivalent protections and equivalent, I guess, benefits under the law that women enjoy these days, or we need to find some sort of equity where it's sort of your rights are balanced by your responsibilities. So if we're going to put more responsibility on men, they should have more rights. If we're going to put less responsibility on women, they should have fewer rights. Those are the only two ways that I can see it working. And personally, I would really prefer the first one to the second one. But I don't think it's sustainable what we're doing now. So.
I just wanted to tell you, because I'm sure you're wondering why a retired executive is sitting up here. Why aren't I in Hawaii or having some fun? And prior to June 28th, 2014, I wouldn't have been here. Never heard of Mythicist Milwaukee. My husband and I had been atheists for decades and never joined any secular groups, couldn't have named a single one of them. And then the United States Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, in Burwell v. Hobby Lobby said, because of Hobby Lobby's religious views, they were not obligated to provide certain forms of birth control to its female employees. And because of Citizens United, you know, corporations are people. So therefore, corporations can have religious views. And I became incensed. I grew up in the 50s and 60s. Women had abortions with coat hangers. They died. In high school, one of my friends went away in the middle of a semester for a few days and came back. She was in New York. I went to Seattle with a band. Came into our room, bed had never been used, looked totally clean, went into the bathroom, and there were bloody rags all over. In college, okay, now it was a Lutheran college, so you can understand. We put in an ad for abortion in New York, and they impounded all the newspapers. So when Roe v. Wade came around, I was ecstatic. We're not going to do that. We're not going to lose lives anymore. And with this Hobby Lobby decision, I became very, very concerned. And I was incensed. I decided to write the book, Women Beyond Belief, Discovering Life Without Religion. I started out with friends. 22 of my friends wrote their personal story of living religion. I went and met with a lot of secular groups, did book tours, and wrote a second book, Women versus Religion, The Case Against Faith and for Freedom. Most of the authors in that are atheist women writers. There aren't many of us, but they're in there. And I have 2 Latinas who tell their particular story, 2 African Americans, a woman who's transgender, etc. And if you don't want to read the books, I have a YouTube channel that has a presentation I've done called From Goddess to God, Elimination of the Feminine Divine, which I think is crucial. And in the last 4 years, I probably read 150 books on religion and myth. I never go halfway on anything. I would like you to remember a phrase. Religion is one of the last cultural barriers to gender equality. We're not going to talk about that a lot today. I'm assuming most of you are atheists. I know Karen's an atheist. But that is what I write about. And when I started writing the book, I hired a marketing consultant, and he said, you have to have a blog. And I'm going like, what's a blog? And he suggested Godless Grandmother. And I said, really? Do we have to emphasize my age on this one? And he came up with Faithless Feminist. Hey, it rhymes. I love it. I'm a second-wave feminist. I don't really think this discussion is about feminism. I think it's about gender inequality. But religion is one of the main reasons that congressmen use to be against abortion. And if we don't have a right to abortion, we don't have bodily autonomy. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I'm very nervous about Brett Kavanaugh and his appointment. And I cannot believe that I've been a member of the National Abortion Rights Action League for 40 years. And I will probably be a member until I die. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, she wants me to start.
But just to be clear, you agree that, so do you think women have achieved gender equality? Just want to get your position.
I do not believe they do.
Okay.
And Karen wanted me to start. And gender equality, now again, we're doing binary just to simplify everything, okay? This is gender equality. Let's say this is the woman, okay? This is the man. This is gender equality. That's not gender equality, and that's not gender equality. Therefore, the first thing I would say is that women should register for the Selective Service. Do you know that in the American Revolutionary War, Deborah Sampson Gannett, 5'9", go for it, fought in the war. She dressed up as a man, and in 1816 she got a pension. Now, at 18, I was the same height, 5'7", and I weighed 90 pounds. I would never have made it through basic training. I would never have been picked for combat. But my goodness, there were other things I could have done. Do you know during World War II, who were the coders? They were the women. Did they lose their jobs after World War II like Rosie the Riveter? No, they didn't. Why? Because men didn't know how to do it. It was a brand new field. So there's many ways to serve our country. I found out when I did my genealogy, I have an ancestor who fought in the Revolutionary War. Therefore, I was able to join the Daughters of the American Revolution. But I want it to be equal. I want to be seen as a patriot. I think women should register for the Selective Service. Now, this is why it's not going to happen. Ted Cruz. The idea that we should forcibly conscript young girls in combat, in my mind, makes little sense at all. He has 2 daughters. I could not in good conscience vote to draft our daughters into the military, sending them off to war and forcing them into combat. So I don't think it's going to happen. It should happen. And that is one of the reasons that men and women are not equal.
Okay.
I'd just like to add to that, traditionalism really does stand as a barrier. Feminism is one barrier, traditionalism is another barrier towards actual gender equality, just like you said. To Ted Cruz, I would say, oh, come off it. They don't line up, 6 beefy guys and 6 private Benjamins and go, okay, you, and you off into a foxhole, and you guys can do the administrative work and fly drones from a safe distance, right? You big beefy guys. If we drafted women, they would not end up on the front lines of combat. 99% of them would not end up there. They would be doing something different. They would be changing tires. They would be cooking French toast in barracks. They would be doing necessary work. When a nation goes to war, it's not just its soldiers, it's frontline soldiers that go to war. When Canada pulled its F-18s out of the Middle East, it wasn't just 14 planes that we pulled out, and it wasn't just 14 pilots that we pulled out. It was a support crew of something like 150 people that are on the ground, not flying the planes, making sure that they are flyable, making sure that they have all of the proper support behind them, the logistical support behind them. So those are jobs that women could do very, very easily. And the only argument to not draft women, if we're going to draft men, is how dare we inconvenience women. That's all it boils down to. So I agree with you. And Ted Cruz, if I ever see him, I'll tell him that right to his face, for sure.
Okay, the next issue I would say where there's inequality is child custody. Can I keep this on for another 5 minutes? Good, cool. I didn't get married until I was 38, and I had my first child at 40. And in the room, we had both gone to Lamaze, and the woman asked me if I wanted an epidural, and my husband said, let's keep breathing. I said, you go fucking breathe in the corner. I'm having an epidural. I was an executive. It was during the legislative session. I was a lobbyist. I took 2 months off, and I tell you, it took me 2 months to recover. My husband, who had twins, who were older, never took any time off in his first marriage. And I said, I want you to take a month off. And he did, and he said success would be whether I came home and they were both there. I came home that first night, and they were both there. He had him holding like this. He didn't exactly have a smile on his face until he gave him to me. I think it's very important that children are raised by 2 parents. And I have a niece who's... I have a niece who's gay. She and her partner are raising the cutest little boy, absolutely adorable. Took her father a long time to accept that she was lesbian. And they're doing a great job. I think in our child custody cases, and I know Karen has said this, about 80% of the child custody goes to women. Now, in the 19th century, our country was built on common law, English common law. And guess who had custody of the children in the 19th century? The men. The men could say in a will, if I die, she does not get my children. And I'm going to say the P word, patriarchy. When you control the property and when you control guardianship, you're in charge. It took a long time to change that. In the 20th century, there was a tender years doctrine, and they said, gee, maybe these little babies would be better off with their mothers. But it took a long time for joint custody, shared parenting, et cetera. And I totally agree with Karen. I've researched the Duluth model. Oh, that's on domestic violence. Missed that one, sorry. Okay. Things are going to have to change for that to happen, because here's what, if a dad stays home, does anyone know who is a single dad stays home? I have a friend, he's not single, but he stays home with the children. But stay-at-home dads get this. Oh, it must be nice not to work. Are you looking for a job? You're just like Mr. Moon. Your wife must be pissed off. What are you charged to babysit your own kind? Seriously, you change diapers? So we have to have a cultural change that says men are needed, men can do the job, and quit the fuck making fun of them, okay?
So you think the inequality in this case is that it's women are here and men are here for child custody? Is that
No,
what
I
you-
think men are here for child
Sorry,
custody
yes.
and women are here
Okay.
because they get it,
Yes.
and 80% of the cases are decided without going to court. So this is either men not fighting, or there's an agreement the woman takes the kid, and it is, you know, I wrote my dissertation on cultural reproduction, and we're not even aware of those forces. I saw an ad the other day on TV with a single dad with his child. That means culture's changing. So you have to step up to the plate, you have to be part of that decision, and it's so important, and I agree with Karen, sons, they need a father. And then finally, there is a group called the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse. It is funded by the government, the Office of Family Assistant, and they support strong fathers and families. If you need help, do it. And you know, if you have to bite the bullet and hire a lawyer, hire a lawyer. Do what you believe is right for your children.
I would add, though, right, of course, because there's always going to be an of course, right, is that, you know, because, okay, so your background is that you were an executive. My background is that I was a waitress. And things don't look the same among the families around me that are breaking up, right? When I divorced, and my divorce was extremely easy compared to a lot of divorces, that was $14,000 just for me, for me, right? And I was making $18,000 a year, right? So with 3 kids. So essentially, you know, saying hire a lawyer doesn't really cut it. And what really, you know, when feminists, the second wave feminists wanted equal pay for equal work, which I believe they weren't getting throughout that, because they didn't, arguably, married women didn't need that, and married men did, right? And so there were cultural factors involved with unequal pay for women compared to men for sometimes the same work. But when feminists decided that they wanted equal pay for equal work, they didn't just listen to people who said, well, we're going to have to wait for the culture to change. Oh, or if after 50 years of women proving themselves as valuable in the workforce as men are, then equal pay will just happen on its own. And this is what men are constantly being told, right? Men are constantly being told, oh, well, when men take an equal portion of the childcare, the hands-on childcare, and they don't consider playing with your kids to be childcare. They consider washing your kids' hair, bathing your kids, driving them to and from soccer practice and school, feeding them, those kinds of, the work of raising kids. That's what they consider to be childcare. And so most men who work longer hours than their wives, typically, right, they aren't putting in those hours. Maybe their wife stays home, right? So she's going to be doing all the child care, and he's going to be spending fun time with the kids when he gets home from work. That doesn't count, right? And to say to these men right now, well, maybe in 50 years when the culture changes, right, when men step up and are doing 50% of the hands-on care of these children at home before the divorce, well, then maybe it'll just happen. No, feminists didn't put up with that in the 1960s when it came to equal pay. It was legislated, and it wasn't legislated at the state level, it was legislated at the federal level, right? That's what happened in 1963 when feminists wanted equality and the culture wasn't moving fast enough. And what men need to do these days, and I really wish feminist groups would stop fighting us on this, is legislate the default presumption at the starting point of divorce to be that parents will share custody roughly equally. And that's a rebuttable presumption. Nobody's saying it's a one-size-fits-all, we're going to force every couple, even if the father's abusive, or even if he works in a work camp up in Fort McMurray or something like that for 3 weeks a month, and he's going to have to take the kid with him. Because, yeah, no, if it's not workable, it's not workable. If it's not just, if one of the parents is abusive, it's not just. But to start from that position, because right now we're starting from a policy position in the United States, in most states, and in every Western country, to some degree. We're starting with a presumption that the best interests of the child are served by having one primary custodial parent and one secondary parent with generous access, which means every other weekend and maybe Wednesday nights, Wednesday evenings. So essentially that's what the model is, that's what the starting point is, and when you start with that as your starting point, of course 90%, it's actually closer to 87% or something like that.
I'll give it to you.
Right? 87% of the people who get custody are going to be mothers. And another thing I would say too is that it's not that men that they don't want to fight. Sometimes they don't have the resources to fight, but even the ones with lawyers, their lawyers know how it goes. I sat down in my divorce in something called a case conference. So it was my lawyer, myself, my ex, his lawyer, and a judge. And it was off the record, no prejudice, and the judge looked through our case files, heard what we had to say, and then told us how things were likely to go if it went to court. Right? This is what's going to happen if this goes to court. Do you think men's lawyers aren't telling them,
You're going to lose.
You're going to lose if you take it to court? Do you think that that's not happening? And so even though only a tiny portion, between 5 and 10% of cases are decided in court, the results of those cases trickle down in terms of the advice that people's lawyers give them. And women, of course, have a whole bunch of secret weapons at their disposal. The Duluth model essentially encodes a male perpetrator, female victim paradigm into all of our domestic violence law and policy. And it's very, very easy. Judges and divorce attorneys both have admitted, they've gone on record saying that false allegations of abuse, whether it's spousal abuse, sexual assault against a spouse, or child sexual abuse against the father, those are cynical ways for women to get a leg up in the divorce negotiations. You get a restraining order. It's very, very easy to get one. It takes about between 3 and 8 minutes in an ex parte hearing in front of a judge. He rubber stamps it, puts it through. The dad's removed from the home. Maybe in 6 weeks to 6 months, there will actually be a hearing where he can state his case. If it's found that it was a groundless temporary restraining order, there were no grounds, he's perfectly innocent, well, by then, the kids are settled into their new routine. And to readjust things now would cause further disruption in their lives. Right, and so this is really a way for women to get custody of the kids, custody of the family home, right, and squeeze the dad out of the kids' lives. And it's a useful tool for parents who want to alienate, which is why about 80% of people who perpetrate parental alienation are women. And it's not because men are angels. It's because it's something that women can do that men very, very often can't. And I'm sure that more men would if they could.
I would just like to say, and I don't disagree that, it's very difficult to wait for culture because culture changes slowly. But if you can't afford a lawyer, you can go to legal aid, and they will represent you. So don't feel because you can't spend $14,000 on a lawyer, you cannot get free legal help. And I have worked to fund legal aid. I have worked to support the people. I think it's important. The National Parents Organization advocates for states to adopt shared parenting if they are both fit, and I think Karen and I would both agree on that. 25 states have introduced bills to do it. And there has been some confusion about women's organizations. The National Organization of Women opposes forced shared parenting. They don't oppose shared parenting. So I think we will both agree that we do need that change. But part of it is, if you're a lawyer, a male lawyer, and you're working 70 hours a week, you're not going to be able to do it. And one of the things that Warren Farrell said who, yes, I read The Myth of Male Power, and he said, without feminism, fewer companies would have experimented with part-time workers, flexible schedule, childcare options, improved safety standards, et cetera. So I think that lessening this 70-hour week is really critical, certainly to both. Do you want to go into another topic?
I did want to add, because it really varies from state to state. I know just in Canada, you would not, if you were a non-custodial parent, you would not qualify for legal aid. And in many states in the US, I'm sure that you will not qualify for legal aid. You will not qualify for it as a non-custodial parent who wants to seek custody. And you certainly don't qualify in many states. I believe it was New York came out with New York's Legal Aid Society, or Massachusetts, or it was on the eastern coast there, came out and essentially said when feminist groups raised a stink about the fact that they were providing legal aid not just for women who had an accusation of domestic violence against their husbands, but also to defend men who were accused. There was such a stink made that the Legal Aid Society just said, well, we're not representing anyone in domestic violence cases whatsoever now, which I think is actually a better solution than them just dropping the accused off of the map and saying, well, we'll help the accusers, but we're not going to help these guys over here who've been accused. I think that that was probably the fairest thing to do under the circumstances, but you cannot necessarily get help from legal aid depending on the details of your case. So, and also, what was it, the 70-hour work week? You know, those are expectations placed on men, and they're not just placed on men by society, they're also placed on men by their wives. You know, so I know men who are workaholics who they are stuck in this catch-22 because, and I gave this example in a video of an acquaintance of mine who, when he got married, his wife and he were both high earners, and they bought a house based on their earning potential together in a very nice neighborhood. And then when she had a child, she decided that she didn't feel like going back to work after 6 months, which was the plan initially. And then after a year and her maternity leave ran out, she didn't feel like going back to work then. And so he essentially started working more and more to make the bills. And then he suggested that they downsize their house, move to a different neighborhood, sell this expensive, expensive house, get something smaller and more modest. She wouldn't hear of it. And sell her car and get her a nice little Honda Civic, maybe the previous year model, you know, so you don't pay as much. No, she still wanted her Toyota RAV4 or whatever it was. So essentially what you have is a woman dictating that her husband do whatever it takes to finance the lifestyle that she had become accustomed to. And him doing it, and then on the flip side of that, her saying, you're never here, you're not emotionally available, right? And complaining, and I'm always stuck here with this child, right? And so it's not just a matter of social expectations, it's also a matter of women's expectations, and it's a matter of some women unilaterally deviating from the plan that they made with their partner when they got together. You know, we have this plan for the future. Oh, well, I don't feel like doing that anymore.
I would not recommend anyone get married in their 20s.
Well, he was 40 and she was 38.
I spent 10 days in the Midwest. I was born in Bismarck. I went to my 50th high school year reunion. That's not me. I felt uncomfortable. And I saw the popular kids. I saw the football players. I saw the cheerleaders. And I felt just as uneasy as I did in high school. As I started to get to Madison, and my friend Jean, who's here with me, and we started walking around and had a wonderful evening with some old friends who were on strike against the University of Wisconsin as teaching assistants in 1980. Yes, I became a union organizer after that. By the time I got married in 38, I kind of knew how to negotiate. I knew how to do that and put that together. And we had a time, I was in my first job when we were married, and I had an opportunity to take another job that was going to take more time. It was an executive job, et cetera. And so did he, and we sat down and negotiated it. And we said, what's better? And he says, I'm going to defer to you. I think you're more interested in this. I took it. So if you're mature, if you know this person, if you've developed a relationship, it's going to come out better. Do things like she said occur? Absolutely. And do relationships break up? Absolutely. Is one person to blame because they go off and become polyamorous? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But the older and more mature you are and you know who you are, then you will be able to negotiate that and have it come out right. I wanted to just start a little bit more on this issue of domestic violence. I, fortunately, have never been in that situation. I'm not sure I even have a close friend who's been in that situation. And I think listening to Karen's videos and reading Warren Farrell's book, I became more aware that men can be raped inside a marriage. Men can be beaten up inside a marriage. And to me, that's a culture that's changing. But how difficult it must be for a man to say to a male friend, my wife beat me. What are they going to say? Oh, Jesus Christ, you couldn't stand up to her? You're 6'5". How did that happen? So it's just like the issue of reporting sexual assaults. It was terrible 50 years ago for women. They were sluts. They wore the wrong clothes. And look what's happening today to Dr. Christine Ford. He was just a teenager. Boys will be boys. I cannot fathom what it would be like for a man to say, I was sexually assaulted by a woman, or, which is more prevalent, I was sexually assaulted by a man. We have got a lot of work to do to say, it's wrong either way, and I will listen to you, and I won't make fun of you.
Okay, did you say it was more prevalent for a man to be sexually assaulted by a man?
The statistics I have read is the majority of children who are assaulted by a male. And that the majority of men who admit, now, I mean, your statistics are only people who come forward. So it could be not a clear view of what's happening at all. But the statistics I have read from the national organizations are that the majority of men are raped by men.
Depends on how you define rape. I mean, this is one of the big controversies and one of the big problems that I have with certain feminists. Mary Peacoss, she was the feminist who she was launched into essentially feminist stardom by Ms. Magazine with an article and a survey that she did in 1985, I believe, on campus rape. And essentially that was the first of the 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 studies. Women will be raped, victims of rape or attempted rape during their time in college. That was really the start of that. She consults for the CDC on their definitions, and the CDC's National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey does a random community sample of thousands of individuals across the country, asking them their experience of intimate partner and sexual violence. And consistently since 2010, they have found that, and here's the thing, right? Rape is defined in a certain way, and there's another category in other sexual violence called made to penetrate, and it is defined in the exact same way. And the only difference is in one, the victim is the person penetrated, and in the other, the victim is the person who penetrates the perpetrator. So that's the only definition, difference in the definition whatsoever. And yet you have, in the previous year numbers, almost identical percentages of men and women reporting these two categories of what I would describe both of them as rape, right? So equal numbers of men reporting made to penetrate as women are reporting rape. And 80%, and here's the really annoying thing, is the CDC has these numbers, but they have not released them in any of their reports. And these results are replicated, through every year since. In fact, the last one found slightly more men reporting made to penetrate than women reporting rape. But essentially, they included the gender of the perpetrator only in the lifetime numbers, right? So 80% or so of the perpetrators of made to penetrate over lifetime, over the people who reported that this had happened to them over their lifetimes. 80% of those perpetrators were women. And we don't know about the previous year, what percentage of perpetrators were women in the previous year alone, previous 12 months alone, because the CDC has not released that information. And a friend of mine actually phoned the CDC asking for that information and was told that they would have to have an application filled out that would describe exactly what she planned to do with that information before they would consider releasing it, which I think is a little hinky. So, I mean, there's that, like I hate when, and even with the children thing, every single study on female perpetrators of sexual abuse against children, every single study I have read has said this is an understudied topic. We were surprised to find that 27% of the perpetrators were women. It's entirely possible that there are more women out there who are undetected even through these surveys and even through these statistics and the crime data that are perpetrating against children. And one of the most interesting studies that was done, it was done by Whittam and Morris in, I think, 1997. They were actually testing a methodology that designed to capture victims of child sexual abuse. So when they were testing this methodology, they used only people, adults, with a documented history of child sexual abuse, and only 16% of adult men who had a documented history disclosed that when answering the survey questions, compared to 64% of women. So women had a 4 times higher rate of disclosure of actual abuse that is confirmed to have happened in their childhood. They had a 4 times higher rate of disclosure than men did. So we could be looking at a huge problem that's just floating under the radar. Kidscape in the UK, and I'm just going to use this for context, said that when they did a survey, 86% of children were not believed when they first disclosed if their perpetrator was female. And the majority of them had disclosed to someone with a duty of care. So police, guidance counselor, therapist, teacher, nurse, doctor, whatever. So.
And it's terrible no matter who does it. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to move on to something.
Ding, ding, ding.
One more thing. I'd like to move on to something that I think everyone in this room can agree to. We need the ERA passed.
Yes.
Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex.
And that is a perfect transition to the Q&A. Sean's at the mic. Line up. Make moves. Also, we are in Wisconsin, so if you're not drinking, you're doing something wrong.
Exactly. But it's legal to drink on the streets, or it's illegal to drink publicly?
It's hard to see people.
I think it's illegal to drink publicly.
First of all, I want to thank Angel Karen so much for showing up, and you really give me belief that there are good feminists out there.
Okay, I can't hear. There's too many people talking.
Okay, sorry. Calm down.
Thank you to both Karens for being here tonight. For today, people are drinking, so I thought it was nice. But you really give me faith that there are good feminists out there. Thank you for that. But I want to ask of Karen Stroheim. I host a free speech organization at my college campus, and I would like the opportunity to speak with you about potentially hosting you as a speaker on my campus, and if you have any fast ways for me to obtain the rights to the Red Pill movie to show that on my campus.
Oh, okay. Well, I can talk to you afterwards, and I'll get you all hooked up with that. Where's your campus? Is it
St. Cloud, Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Hey, let's clap for the Midwest.
He wants you to come in December too.
Yeah, do I have to speak with one of those weird hybrid Norwegian Minnesotan accents?
That's very funny because
Yeah, sure, you betcha.
Yeah.
I'm actually an international student from Norway, so that's gonna be.
I've been practicing all week.
Yeah.
Hey there, guys. My name's
Hi,
Adam.
Adam.
Do you guys like my wings?
Goes with her head.
Yeah.
Please.
I have a question for Karen Garst. So there are instances of the law, such as the Violence Against Women's Act. A friend of mine, she was an illegal immigrant. She got married, and she was going through a rough marriage. So she decided she was going to use the Violence Against Women's Act as a way to get quickly to a green card. Even though she was going to make up the whole story about abuse from her husband. And I had to talk her out of that situation to not go through with that. What more do you think we can do to prevent laws like these from being weaponized for political means or for just getting back at someone?
I don't know. My son told me the story of a friend of his who was at a bar drinking. The woman was drinking. They went back to her house. They didn't have sex. This person left, got a call from the police the next day. She had a boyfriend and she wanted to say, this person raped me. Now, fortunately, in that particular case, the police officer believed the man. So there's always going to be abuse of those situations. But, the more men who come forward and are saying, that's not true and I can prove it and da-da-da-da-da, the better. But there will always be people who take advantage no matter what the law is. I'm sorry, I just don't think there's a good solution to it. Thank you for bringing it up. That was the nambiest pampus
Well,
clap I've ever seen.
You bummed everybody
Just don't
out.
clap, just don't clap.
You got no solutions. You bummed everyone out. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Right? I'm like,
Okay,
okay,
yeah.
so there's no solution.
Hello. So I know this was at the beginning of the talk where we talked about having women sign up for selective service, and it kind of got me thinking about it because I'm actually a veteran myself. So that's fine. But the climate in the military is a lot different than the national, climate, and there actually is a lot of the rape statistics tend to be a lot higher, a lot more acts that I would see that are towards women that are more considered what I would believe like traditional feminists would say is kind of keeping women down. But I also think that a lot of that has to do with the inequality of the women not being held to expectations. I guess my question is, how do you think that the religiosity, having a really firm religion in military affects those like gender roles and how that actually might possibly increase the differences, which is actually, and anyway, sorry, I don't know if that was.
Oh, I think religion, can you imagine what it was like to have a mother goddess and to see a feminine divine and then have every symbol of that goddess, the snake, the tree, turned into the woman is sin, and being brought up to know that women created original sin according to St. Augustine, and you grow up in that household that the male is in charge and the male is in charge and the male is in charge. I think religion plays a huge role in our culture, and I would like to see it eliminated.
And yeah, and I also meant for the men as well, like the men who want to come forward to say that they have been raped. It's very common in the military that we have classes and stuff that tell us, be sure to come up, you're a man, but it doesn't make you any less of a man. However, the culture is primarily, even those in charge will make fun of junior military members and make fun of the men that have been raped, whether by other men or possibly by their wives.
That's got to change.
Thanks for both being here. The main question in the beginning was, have women achieved gender equality? The way both of you gave examples, you showed not only women are now equal, but now men have the short stick. Karen Garst, in the beginning you said women do not have gender equality. So I just want to make sure by you saying that, do you feel that women are still the oppressed gender and are on the low end of the gender equality, or now are men now need to achieve gender equality?
Oh, I didn't want to go into the traditional arguments about pay equity. I will say that people have to speak up. When I was executive at the bar, they hired a person in a subsidiary organization and paid that person substantially more than me. And I went to my board of governors, I'm going to sue you puppies. I mean, this is not going to happen. And they hired a consultant. The consultant says, she's got 90 employees, he's got 40, give me a break. And I got a substantial raise. So you have to stand up for those things. When men were teachers in the 19th century and it transitioned to women in teachers in the 20th century, they got a third of the pay of men. And I don't believe there's pay equity. I think we rate number 65 in the civilized isn't right, the developed world in terms of pay equity, and Iceland is first. And Iceland is the least religious country in the world. So we have those issues. We have reproductive freedom issues. If Brett Kavanaugh gets on the Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade is overturned, we will have a revolution. And I can't believe we still are fighting for it.
I just want to give kudos to Iceland as well, because I think that they are the first country in the world that introduced a bill to ban male genital mutilation of minors.
And they have a pirate party.
Yeah, well, it failed, but but they introduced it.
This is aimed at Honey Badger Karen. I just drove 9.5 hours just to, tell you to your face, thank you very much for all the work that you've been doing. Thank you very much for the tenacity. And honestly, I lost everything last year that had any value to me. And rewatching some of your videos and listening to some of your talks definitely gave me the inertia I needed to get back on my feet. So I really just wanted to thank you.
Hello, this is directed at the Angel Karen. A lot of the newfound suspicion towards feminism comes from sort of the overt hostile attitude that a lot of feminists take. And whenever I ask those feminists of what's the attitude for, a lot of them cite the fact that historically when women are confident and speak out, they're labeled as bitches. But I think sort of that the knowledge of that has kind of become twisted, that a lot of people think since women who were confident were labeled as bitches, therefore if I'm acting like a bitch, I'm not actually a bitch, I'm confident. And I think a lot of people have sort of used that historical, which was a reality, and it still somewhat is a reality today, as sort of an excuse to act worse than they actually need to. So I guess my question for you is, what do you think would be sort of a good rule of thumb for women or just anyone in general to sort of differentiate when they're being respectfully competent and adversarial versus when they're being unnecessarily hostile and cruel?
Well, let me just give you one example. I wrote, Shannon Babyloni and I were collaborating. She was a bloggist, and we collaborated on this blog post saying we need more secular men. And I posted it to this atheist Facebook group called No Gods, No Masters, Atheist Females. And I happened to be on there when it was going, and they said, did she really write that? Did she really say we need more secular men? And I said, hey, look, women would not have gotten the right to vote without working with men. And the Declaration of Sentiments, I think it's Frances Wright who wrote the resolution saying, we need men and women to come together. And I said that, and they said, oh, she's going to make them cake. So I have been, and they kicked me off their site, because I was talking about men and women working together. So there'll always be radicals. There'll always be people like that. And you just need to keep pushing, and you need to keep talking, and you need to be reasonable.
Brian, what are you doing down
Hey, Karen. Big fan. I want to first off thank both Karens, who both represent Badgers, for coming out and having a really amicable discussion. And I wanted to go back to something that Karen Garst said regarding, marriage.
Just call her the good Karen.
I'll say good Karen, okay. You were talking about how 20-year-old women should not get married. And I guess it brings a bit of a biological problem. Okay. I didn't do that. So we know that when women hit about the age of 25 or 26, their eggs start to go bad. And that means that that's true. The risk of children, not being born, I guess, at their prime starts to diminish. And that it can be a challenge if you're a woman that definitely wants to have kids and wants to give your children the best odds. So have you it's just something to think about. I know that...
Freeze your eggs.
When I started to wanted to be pregnant, I had a miscarriage. And it was really devastating. It was really early on, and my husband was out of town. And my gynecologist had said, wait a couple months. I got pregnant right away again. But I did an amniocentesis because if there was a deformity or something in that, and I knew the chances were better, I was going to have an abortion. And that's the other thing why the right of abortion is so important. So I don't know. I think more women are having children later. I would be surprised about that 25-year mark, but I have not done research on it.
Yeah, I think essentially your fertility peaks between 25 and 26 years of age, and then it starts to slowly decline, and then you start having problems in your 30s, especially if you haven't had any children in your 20s. So if you've had a child in your 20s, it's very easy. My sister's done it a couple of times, while using 2 forms of birth control. Getting pregnant in your 30s because you had babies in your 20s, right? So sometimes that happens, but if you haven't had a child before you're 35, it's actually quite difficult. It can be quite difficult to have one. So.
And risky.
What I thought was really interesting, the
Unless you're well
gynecologist told us we had to have sex like every 3 days. You think he would have been totally excited about that? No, I had to put on special clothes and everything. I couldn't believe it.
Well, it's a chore then. I mean, if it's
a chore.
If it's for something other than fun, geez.
He's going to kill me for
It's a lot of
saying
pressure.
My question is for the faithless feminist. I'm pro-choice, and I've seen a lot of other people who are pro-choice actually being more pro-abortion, saying it's a good thing to get an abortion, or I'm proud to have gotten an abortion. Okay. Do you think that abortion is a necessary evil as somebody else who is pro-choice?
I wish we never had abortion, except in like the case to save a mother, or there's, the fetus you're carrying doesn't have a brain. Do you really have to go through 4 more months? That is just unconscionable. But I do have, okay, I'm going to share with you my only fascist idea. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Horns too right now, so it's perfect.
Okay, every woman at the age of 12 gets a Norplant. And then when they're 21, they can be straight, they can be gay, they can be transgender, they can be anything. They have to show they've read a book about how to raise the children, and they have to have some money to raise them.
You know what? All right. That works for me.
We're gonna get a good Karen question.
I'm actually the bad Karen in disguise now.
You're doing a great job.
Well, this one is for Karen Garst. So it appears on the surface that your position that you expressed today is not very much in line with mainstream feminism today. And it's really closer to 1960s or second wave feminism, or even first wave with pro-choice added onto it. In 2016, there was a bill in Florida, the state of Florida, that if passed would give presumed shared custody between 2 people. And this is not forced, as you mentioned. This is a starting point of which would be adjusted based on abuse or other types of factors. So this was passed by a supermajority in the Senate and the House in Florida, and it was vetoed by Rick Scott under pressure from the National Organization of Women. In fact, his office received 11,000 phone calls, 4 to 1, in support of the bill to have presumed shared parenting.
Yeah,
So,
I'm not familiar with that
Right.
particular bill, but I do tell you, you are a group that's on social media, you are aware of all these things happening. Every person I have asked in the last 4 years, what is the definition of feminism? And they say gender equality. So it's unfortunate. I'm going to take a look in that, and I have been a member of NOW for 40 years, and if they did that, I'm stopping.
Well, I hope so, because just to add to that story, it was also an alimony reform bill that would end the presumption of the automatic lifetime alimony that men have to pay in Florida. So men in Florida aren't allowed technically to retire if they're divorced because they have to keep paying alimony at the same rate until their wives are dead or remarried. And so essentially so this was a bill that would, the bill was originally put forward in 2013. It was vetoed in 2013. Governor Rick Scott got reelected in 2014 or 15, I believe, and then he vetoed it again. And both of those instances were at the behest of the Florida chapter of the National Organization for Women and other women's groups.
Yeah, and I think alimony is becoming
stupid,
much different. Well,
sorry.
You know, if a woman has stayed home the whole time, yes. But in my husband's situation, where he had been married, he never paid any alimony. He paid child support until they were through college. So I don't know of a lot of alimony being paid lately, but it was certainly 50 years ago when the woman didn't have a job and she had stayed home as a very tough job. I could not do it. I told my son, I said I was a really good part-time mom, but I couldn't have been a good full-time mom. It was appropriate, but I think it's less awarded now.
Okay, first of all, love the discussion. It was awesome. And one thing I've noticed, and I don't know if everyone's noticed, is this, like, not just feminism, but social justice in general, is that it always starts with good intentions, but it always, almost without exception, results in an overcorrection. Is there any way to, address that, or is that just a consequence of the kind of the freedom of speech thing?
Well, I think I don't know if this is an answer to that, but we need the ERA. We need the ERA so that if men are disadvantaged in something, they've got a law to pursue. Yep. 2 more states is all we need. And we don't need a Phyllis Schlafly coming forward.
Oh,
okay?
No, we
We
don't.
need to do it. We should unite the women's organizations and the men's rights organizations and get it passed.
Yeah, it's passing the ERA is the second item on the mission statement of the largest men's rights website.
Good.
On the planet, avoiceformen.com. It is the second item. So.
Hi, I wanted to start an MRA group at my campus, and I was wondering for the temporary good, Karen. Is there a way to both include a wide range of ideas and try to avoid that hellfire, the social hellfire that comes with having an MRA group?
Okay, you're never going to be able to have a group of men on a campus, like especially a liberal campus, that is not based on sports or a fraternity, so partying and getting drunk and stuff. You're not going to be able to have a group that's about men's issues and about politics that is for men. You're not going to be able to do it without courting controversy. So I would say if you want to start this group, just do it. Expect that you're going to get called a misogynist. Expect that you're going to be called a bunch of dude bros and sitting in a room with an Xbox talking about raping women, right? That's what they're going to say. Just water off a duck's back and just put in the work and try and do it. So,
I would like to say one final thing. This week, my blog, which is Faithless Feminist,
Subscribe.
I am putting up, and it'll be up this evening, the 10 Commandments of Gender Equality. I think we can all agree. Let's start with that. Yeah.
Last question.
Hi.
Tim.
Yes, hi. Whenever critiquing feminism, right, you always get this, but feminism is so many different things, right? Which is true, but it's also true that feminism is one thing to the extent that it's one word. And it's that word itself that identifies a central problem, I think. My question is, why are we so married to this term feminism? Isn't it really like feminism? And what's the resistance of transitioning to a new gender-neutral gender politics?
Go for it. Well, gender equality would be the word. And if you look at I'll just read a couple of these 10 commandments. The first one is body autonomy. Neither a man's or woman's body can be used against their will for any purpose. Equality under the law. Men and women should be treated equally under the law. Let's just go to gender equality.
All right.
Organizer question. Karen, in 2017, you had said we're not going to make any change with having 2 men on stage talk about feminism. How did we do this year?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
In 2017, the Thomas Smith-Sargon debate, you had mentioned we're not going to make any change by having 2 men on stage talk about feminism.
I did.
How
Did we do a better job?
Was this okay?
This is good.
Okay.
I had the easiest job.
All right.
I thought it would be more combative.
We have drastically cut into our break time, but I will say 3 quick things. One, and one of the questioners said this, thank you so much for coming from some really, really far distances to be here, the greatest city on earth, Milwaukee. So, thank you for clapping. Different countries, different states, it's phenomenal.